I'm sorry I'm late. I'm gonna wait a few minutes for some more people to join us. I'm so sorry I'm late. My Zoom subscription expired. I didn't realize it, and I couldn't live stream until I went back and renewed my Zoom subscription. So please excuse me for that. I haven't been feeling so well the last week or so, and my mind is still not 100% back to where it was. So please excuse me for my lateness. Thank you very much for joining me tonight, even a little bit late. I thought tonight we would talk about some of our Whig supporters in the parliament, but I am going to wait a few minutes for more people to join in case people were waiting and thought maybe I wasn't going to do this. I am here. A few people have said hello, hi to all of you, to Ms. Kane and Ms. Wyman. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. And please be sure to say hi in the chat so I know you're here and I can say hello. I did turn on something new tonight that should repeat your comments back and forth from YouTube to Facebook so that you can see each other's comments. I won't have to read them all to explain to people what I'm answering. Hello, Mr. Davis. It's good to see you as well. As you can see, I'm still not back to 100%. I'm so sorry I missed you last week. I'm not feeling that great tonight, but I didn't want to miss another night, so I'm here. My dog Rex is here, 60 degrees in Florida, and he's reminding everyone, of course, to please hit the like button and to share my videos with your friends and everyone you think would enjoy learning about the American Revolution. Oh, Ms. Kane, thank you. I hope I get better too. I've been kind of up and down all week. It's really kind of strange. Mr. Brewster, I think this is a Mr. Brewster, learn something about the Revolutionary War era every day, and you should. Tonight we're going to talk about America's supporters in the Whig Party in England. It's a very interesting story. I'm not going to get too deeply into it because it gets complicated, but just enough to give you an idea of who our supporters were over there and what their opinions were. But before I do that, I wanted to announce a couple dates for you. Of course, I have to look here to find them as usual, because I keep forgetting what I'm doing. I'm so shall I say, like, just from being sick, I just can't get my mind back together here. But I have two dates coming up where I am going to be in New York City giving tours so that you know. May 17th and November 7th, I will be joining up with Tri-Spy Tours of Setauket, Long Island, to give a Culper Spy Ring tour. Those are both on Sundays, May 17th and November 7th. And as we get ready to market this event, I'll give you more information about it. But I will be joining them in New York City on those Sundays, giving my Culper Spy Ring tour. So maybe some of you come out and join us. Let's see. The rebels from Tennessee are here. I'm glad to see you. And Mr. Telek. It is cold enough for me. It is very cold. You can see I have on a quilted jacket and a scarf tonight, and my throat is still a little dry. The air is very cold and dry outside. It is very beautiful, though, I have to say that. What else am I going to be doing? The weekend of July 10th and 11th. I think it's 10th and 11th. Let me check here. 11th and 12th. July 11th and 12th here in Northeastern Pennsylvania. We are going to have a two-day event for the Battle of Wyoming, which took place here. Two-day event. On Saturday, we'll have a whole bunch of things going on, and on Sunday as well. So, Miss Frederick is here. Good evening, Miss Frederick. Miss Frederick should be there on July 11th and 12th at the Battle of Wyoming, where we will have a battle reenactment. We'll have a number of different regiments here. Lots of interesting stuff going on. Cooking. Of course, we'll have our ladies' wardrobe tent where you ladies can come by and dress up like you're in the 18th century. And I think we're going to have men's clothes at that event as well. Also, on that first day, there will be a battle. On the second day, I will be leading something called Escape from Wyoming, which is going to be a walk through the nearby woodlands as if you were trying to escape the battle and its aftermath. The tour will be led by ladies. There will be some men on the tour. And on that tour, you are going to experience what it was like that day in the Wyoming Valley when that battle occurred. It was a frightening and horrific day, and we are going to do our best, both in the way we're dressed and we present ourselves to reenact the horrors of that day. So mark your calendar, July 11th and 12th. And you, of course, know that if Mrs. Q is going to be designing and leading an immersive tour, that it is going to be something unforgettable. So please come out and join us those 2 days. Oh, Ms. Frederick, of course, will be there. She'll be in the ladies' tent, and I'm sure she will be on the Escape from Wyoming on Sunday. Ms. Frederick, if she is not embarrassed for me telling you, ancestor fought in the Battle of Wyoming and survived. So she'll be playing someone very interesting that weekend, I'm sure. So put those on your calendar, May 17th, July 11th and 12th, and November 7th. Those are only so far 3 events I have committed myself to, but there are more coming, and I'll tell you about them as we get closer to those dates. So tonight I thought we would talk about some of our Whig supporters in Parliament in England. Now, I've talked before about Whigs and Tories in the colonies, and just in general that the Whigs supported separation from England and the Tories supported the Crown's authority over the colonies. Ms. Frederick says she'll be channeling her foremothers. Excellent, excellent. I'm not going to tell you Ms. Frederick's first name that she'll be using that weekend. You'll have to come and find out. It is a lovely first name. So we'll be working that up as the months go by. So here in America, we had Whigs and Tories. As you know, we've been talking about Thomas Paine and him writing about Whigs and Tories, and that Whigs in general were the rebels who wanted separation from England, and that the Tories supported staying with the Crown and continued Crown authority over the colonies. There were Whigs and Tories in England as well, but they were different. That's not what they were. The Whigs in England supported more governance through Parliament, through House of Lords and House of Commons, and more representation of the people and lawmaking. They did no longer support divine right of kings, which meant that the king could make any decision and do anything he wanted to, or queen, anything she wanted to, without question, because they had a divine right to do so. The Whigs were opposed to that and were more in favor of parliamentary rule. Now, the Whigs in England also tended to be aristocrats. So that's a little hard for us to think of because, you know, in America in the 21st century, right, we think of aristocrats as wanting less power for the people, but this was a little different. So we have to try to put ourselves in 18th century England's frame of mind. So the Whigs at that time wanted more governance through the Parliament, less power in the monarch. They also did not like the East India Company, which we'll talk about, not because the East India Company was exploiting people in India or doing bad things in China and around the world or here in America, but because the East India Company was the source of so much governmental corruption. So they also wanted to try to end corruption in both houses of Parliament. So that's a little bit about the Whigs of England. The Tories, on the other hand, still supported monarchical rule, and that the king had ultimate authority even over the Parliament, even after the Glorious Revolution of 1689. So you can see it's a little bit different, but you know, the Tories here support the king. They may not support divine right of kings, but they support the king. The Tories in England still support king's authority. The Whigs here don't want anything to do with England anymore. And the Whigs over there, we're going to talk about them. There are subgroups in those Whigs. Some of those Whigs supported us virtually all the way to independence. Others did not. But we did have friends over there. Let's see, my dog Rex says, back in Mrs. Q time, immigration was not an issue. No, in time of the Revolutionary War, virtually anyone who wanted to come here could come here. If you came here from England or Scotland, because England controlled Scotland at that time, if you came from England or Scotland, you were still a subject of the crown. You're still a subject of the crown, entitled to all the rights and privileges of a subject of the crown, as guaranteed under the Glorious Revolution, Magna Carta, and later the Declaration of Rights, right? That's all from that Glorious Revolution period in 1688, 1689. Everyone who came from England was still considered a subject of the crown here, deserving of all those same rights and privileges. If you came from elsewhere, once you were here for 7 years, you were also entitled to all those rights and privileges. So virtually everyone here, by the time the conflict breaks out with the Stamp Act in 1765, is naturalized or by birth subject of the crown, right? If your parents are naturalized and then you're born here, you're a natural born subject of the crown, they would say. So everyone here considers themselves to be subjects of England, pretty much everyone, and entitled to all those rights and privileges. The idea of immigration and who could come from where doesn't happen until after the ratification of the Constitution. So that's off in my future as well, maybe not. I'm kind of jumping around in time tonight to try to give you a timeline of what happened with these various Whigs. So we're jumping around a bit, but that idea doesn't come until later. And I'll just tell you a little funny little story that Mrs. Q in real life and in Revolutionary War life, family is from what in your time is called Italy, right? From Rome. And I was very amused to find out that after the Constitution, when they were writing down which people they wanted to come to America and which people they did not, they excluded Sicilians. They did not want people from Sicily, which my own grandmother would have, of course, agreed with 100%. As she and all the other ladies, as I was growing up, would always say to me, no Sicilian boyfriends, no Sicilians, bad, they would tell me in their broken English. So I thought it was quite interesting that those early Americans wanted to exclude people from the island of Sicily and others. And maybe one night I will talk about, who they thought should come here and who they thought shouldn't come here. So the Whigs in England. Okay, so who are we going to start with? I don't really know. I have a bunch of pictures of these guys here for you. And let's see who the first picture is. And that's who we'll talk about. So who do we have first? Who is this? Oh, we have, especially for those of you here in my part of Pennsylvania, we have Isaac Barre. No, I have a little thing up here that says mute. I thought I muted myself, but I didn't. This is Colonel and later Member of Parliament, Isaac Barre. Some people say Barra, some people say Barre. If you go on a website that translates names to English and you type it in correctly with the right, little tilde thing over the E, you'll get Barre. So Isaac Barre was a colonel in the British military. He became a member of parliament, and he was a staunch supporter of the colonies being given all rights and privileges of British subjects, right? So we talked about this before, that the idea was that if you had come here to settle this land on behalf of England and the wealth that it would acquire for England, one of the things you got in return were rights as British subjects, right? So British subjects. So he firmly believed that the colonies needed to have all of those rights recognized and preserved and treated accordingly. So when England started encroaching on our rights as British subjects, say with the sugar tax, the molasses tax, the Stamp Act is the big one, right? No taxation without representation, because as British subjects, you can only be taxed for revenue with consent, right? By people you elected. So a revenue tax is a tax that raises money for a governing body to spend as needed. Other taxes, of course, came out of the colonies. Most importantly, customs, duties on imports, exports, which we in the colonies agreed the British Empire had the right to set because the government did need money to operate. And so it was accepted that goods entering and leaving ports within the British Empire were subject to duties going in and out. And that was a source of revenue for the Parliament. But the Parliament could not take revenue from us directly without our consent. So the Stamp Act, although it was presented as being a tax to pay for the military here, turned out to be partly a revenue tax, and for that reason was said to be illegal and that the Parliament could not pass it. At that time, lots of debate began to break out in Parliament between the Whigs, of which Mr. Barre was one, and the Tories, of which the man who was behind these taxes, Mr. Townsend, you might know the Townsend Acts, right, which were other acts against the colonies, including the Quartering Act, the Townsend Acts. So there was a debate going on, and Townsend gave a speech in the Parliament. He was in the ministry, all about how the colonies had prospered because England had nurtured us, looked out for us, protected us, all of these things. And Colonel Barre was just completely disgusted by that whole idea. And he stood up in House of Commons, he stood up in Commons, and he said, you know, protected by us, nurtured by us. He said, we've ignored them. He said, the reason that they've prospered is because we have ignored them, that we have not pressured them, we have not expanded any of our, you know, we would say today, nonsense on them, that we have let them rule themselves and prosper. And that is why they are successful. And he gave a long speech refuting all of the things Townsend said. Now, within that speech, one of the things he said was the true sons of liberty are those who left here and went to that terrible land in order to tame it and create income for us. In other words, beneficially for us, the true sons of liberty. And that is where the Sons of Liberty, formerly Committees of Correspondence, took their name from Colonel Barré's speech. So we have the great Isaac Barré. He did other things, but he's most known for his speech in defense of us and calling us here the true sons of liberty. And you can probably guess, if you're from my area, who is going to be next. Next is the great Mr. John Wilkes, for whom there's a college not far from where I live today, Wilkes University, and for whom there is a town, Wilkes-Barre, or Wilkes-Barre, as they say here, Pennsylvania, or Wilkes-Barre, as my grandmother, who was born there, used to say, so however you want to say it. But this is the great John Wilkes. John Wilkes was a true radical Whig, and that Wilkes advocated much more representation in the Commons for the regular people, and also more power in the Commons in governing. He also was a publisher. He published a journal called the North Briton. The regular standard journal that went out in London about the government, I think, was called the Briton. I forgot what it was called. And his was a satire of that official journal, the North Briton. Well, Mr. Wilkes, among other things, got up regularly in the Parliament defending the colonies, but he was seen as, I want to say, so common that he had been mayor of London also, by the way, Lord Mayor of London. He was seen as so common and so rough that when he took his seat in Parliament, many members of the Commons got up and left, including some of the Whigs. So he's going to belong to a very, very radical faction of the Whig Party, who are going to support the colonies virtually 100% every time the colonies are opposed to England. John Wilkes also, I mentioned his publication, The North Briton, came out weekly. Well, number 45 of the North Briton, which I have a copy, it's quite amusing to read. Number 45 of the North Briton was deemed to be so treasonous, pornographic, and disgusting that it was called a seditious publication, and he was actually arrested and put in the Tower of London for printing it. Now, Wilkes was no fool, of course, and he understood that as a member of Parliament, he was entitled to free speech. He had certain free speech rights, because one of the things the Glorious Revolution of 1689 did was it protected members of Parliament from being arrested by the king and jailed for what they said, opening up free debate in the Parliament. So John Wilkes got a bunch of lawyers, and he sued and said he was innocent of those charges, or he couldn't be held on those charges because as a member of Parliament, he enjoyed the right of free speech, and they had to release him. He then went so far as to enter a civil lawsuit against the men who went on his property to arrest him as trespassers. So John Wilkes, a really incredible man, somebody who was who he was and stood by what he believed, no matter what the opposition to him was. And the opposition was great. And I just want to share with you the great artist of that time, William Hogarth, did this engraving of John Wilkes. You notice he's got the Liberty cap up there, right? Because in America, they used to say to Wilkes, liberty, and the number 45. And I should have put one in here, but you'll see drawings from the time of the Sons of Liberty, and they might be wearing a hat with the number 45 on it, or they might be waving a little banner with a 45. That's where the 45 comes from issue number 45 of the North Briton, published by John Wilkes. John Wilkes apparently got a really good laugh at this. He had a good sense of humor and laughed really hard. Wilkes was also a big prankster in the Parliament. He was also a member of the Hellfire Club, and there was a great story about how one night at the Hellfire Club, they were all extremely drunk out of their minds, and Wilkes hired a man in, I think, a gorilla suit to run around while they were all drunk and scare the crap out of them. So it was pretty funny. He was known as quite a good prankster in, his personal life. So John Wilkes, another great supporter of the colonies. Now, who do we have here next? Oh, another great radical, Mr. William Pitt, Pitt the Elder, excuse me, the Earl of Chatham. Excuse me, this is terrible. The Earl of Chatham, who was Chancellor of the Exchequer, that's like Treasury Secretary for you guys in America in the 21st century, during the French and Indian War. And so Pitt wound up getting blamed for the great expense and debt that the crown went into in order to stay in the French and Indian War and ultimately get a deal with the French. So they blamed him for the debt that they went into. Pitt, however, spoke out against the Stamp Act and other attempts to raise that revenue from the colonies. He spoke out against it because he and his advisor from Scotland, Adam Smith, who you might know, had both visited the colonies a number of times, and they had a different idea for raising that revenue. Their idea was that the colonies should be set free of the Navigation Acts and limitations on their manufacturing and exporting. And they believed that the money that would be made on the duties of the exports from the colonies would far outpace anything they could make in revenue taxes. So Pitt was also an outspoken enemy of the Stamp Act, the Quartering Act, the Tea Act, the whole bunch of them as well. So William Pitt, who also served a short time as prime minister. William Pitt also, about a month or two before Lexington and Concord happened, was very old and sick and went in to address the House of Lords and told them to withdraw the military from Massachusetts because he said the first shot fired would be mortal and they would lose the colonies. It would be a mortal wound. And he said, for all we know, that shot may have been fired already and they might be lost to us. Pitt believed that the colonies would one day rule the world. He said, the colonies will have the world. They will have it as part of us or separate from us, but they one day will have this world. Pitt and Smith also advocated a type of self-rule for the colonies, that the colonies would have their own parliament, and that parliament would then send some number of representatives to the English parliament, a type of self-rule here. He also, at one time, when he was really extreme ideas, felt that the crown and the ministry should move to America because he said an island cannot rule a continent. So this is the great William Pitt the Elder, the Earl of Chatham. Some American cities still have their Pitt statues. New York has parts of their Pitt statue in the New York Historical Society, and South Carolina has theirs as well, but I forgot where it is. And there might be one more. Many of the cities had Pitt statues, and of course, Pittston, Pennsylvania is named for William Pitt, and Pittsburgh is named for William Pitt as well. So another great radical supporter of the colonies, William Pitt. Hello, Mr. Facemeyer in Manassas. Who do we have next in our? Oh, here we go. 1774, a protest entered into by 9 lords in the House of Lords. And this is a protest against a recent speech given in the House of Lords to the king, right? So the way the bodies would work is that the House of Commons would send a letter, whatever they wanted to do, to the king, and the king would address them back, send an address back. House of Lords would do the same thing. They would send an address to the king would address them back, and that sort of thing. So this is a protest of a recent address to the king sent by the House of Lords in 1774. I went everywhere to try to find that address, and I couldn't find that specific one to see what they were objecting to, but they were objecting to some form of treatment of the American colonies. Now, if it's 1774, and this is December 1774, so Boston is already under military rule, right? And they are also blockaded. Now, this protest, you probably can't see the names on it that well, but there are two interesting names on there. One is Rockingham, and this is Rockingham. You know, of course, I would forget his real name, Charles Wentworth somebody, the third Earl of Rockingham. You know, we Americans just can't do these peer names and real names. Anyway, this is Rockingham, who was Charles Wentworth someone. I wish I could recall. Charles Wentworth someone. This is really bothering me. Hold on just a minute. Let me find Rockingham. Let me find Rockingham here. Where is he? Oh my goodness. I just had him. Second Marquess of Rockingham. Charles Watson Wentworth. I'm sorry. Oh, there's his. Charles Watson Wentworth, the second Marquess of Rockingham. See, I don't even know these titles, but how would we Americans know these titles anyway? So anyway, this is Rockingham. And there's a group of Whigs called the Rockingham Whigs. And those are the 9 Whigs who signed that declaration in the House of Lords. There are Rockingham Whigs in the Commons as well, and Edmund Burke was one of those. Edmund Burke, also a staunch supporter of the colonies up to a point. He also objected to the military occupation of Boston. He said it was, against everything England stood for to violate a colonial charter. He also served for a short time as the agent to Parliament for the colony of New York. Edmund Burke, also known as a great lawyer and legal mind, you might know Edmund Burke, and philosopher. So he belongs to this group, the Rockingham Whigs, as they're known, and led by Rockingham. So these are the Whigs who are a subset of the other Whigs. So we have Pitt and Adam Smith and Barré and Wilkes, who are extremely radical Whigs who always support the colonies and virtually everything that we do, up to independence, right? They'll support us until we declare ourselves independent. And then Pitt and Smith can't go that far. But the other two maybe quietly did support our move for independence. Rockingham leads a group of radical Whigs within the Parliament who believe in more rule by Parliament, but they don't like George III's idea of not having party rule. So George III came in and said, this Whig and Tory stuff has really been not good for England, and I'm going to choose my ministry not by party dominance, but by the various men that I want. And I think you should all give up this Whig and Tory opposition and just have a more populist type of representation. Well, these Whigs didn't like this because they worried that that would eventually lead to more power to the king. So they liked being an opposition party to the Tories, who supported more king power, where they could be an opposition party and keep pushing for less monarchical power. I know it all sounds crazy to us. This is the simplest way I can explain it. I'm sure somebody's going to say, Mrs. Q, it was more complicated than that. And it was, but I'm trying to kind of make it simple for you to grasp. But Rockingham is known as a major player at that time and will serve as prime minister twice himself. It's because of Rockingham that the Stamp Act will be repealed. He will get the Stamp Act repealed. He's prime minister in 1766 for a time. He's the Rockingham government, and he gets the Stamp Act repealed. And then he'll be prime minister again after the war. During the war in 1782. He'll be prime minister again. And at that time, I think he tries to advocate for an armistice and end of the war in 1782. Now, Rockingham supports opposite. He's not, I should say, Rockingham is opposed to the Stamp Act, the Quartering Act, the Tea Act. As I said, his group of Whigs, they don't like the East India Company. They're opposed to them. They believe they're bad for England because they are feeding and financing corruption in the government. So they don't like that corporate corruption either. But interestingly, they are not so in favor of some of the more radical speech and things going on in America. So they still view parliamentary superiority over the colonies. They believe that we should, in the colonies, still have all of our rights and privileges as British subjects, but that the parliament still has ultimate authority over us, which those really radical Whigs we were talking about, Pitt, Smith, Barré, and Wilkes, are kind of advocating for us to have our own government here, a type of self-rule. So they're going to differ on that. But Rockingham is known as a great leader and being instrumental in pushing back against growing monarchical power, trying to get that power back to where it was before the Glorious Revolution. And one of the guys who signed that with him is Charles Lennox, the Earl of Richmond. His peer name is Richmond, the Earl of Lennox. And he's also one of these guys, one of these Rockingham Whigs. And it wasn't until many years later that people realized how much Lennox really loved the colonies, when after he died, his family found in his possession a parchment copy of the Declaration of Independence, a signed copy, which it was believed someone from America brought to him on his request. And more recently, the idea is that the person who did that was Thomas Paine, as Lennox was a supporter of Thomas Paine's. So Lennox supported the colonies and loved us so much and was such a believer in what we could achieve as our own governing nation that he had an original signed copy of the Declaration of Independence in his personal papers. So that's just a short introduction to who some of these Whigs in the Parliament were, who the colonies at that time considered to be their friends. And of course, after the Declaration of Independence and all that happens, virtually no one in England is our friend anymore, right? Because we've now declared ourselves in rebellion, and as they saw it, had fomented a civil war against our own government. But at least leading up to that, we had some, for many years, strong advocates for our rights and liberties here in the colonies, in the Parliament. So thank you all for joining me again tonight on a Mrs. Q Live. In the coming weeks, I'm going to be having some more announcements for you of some events, but also some other things I'm going to be doing, as I'm going to be taking a little bit of a different direction in my history part of my life. And I'm going to get back out traveling and doing a lot more on-scene videos for you of historic sites. I really miss doing it. I spoke to Mr. Q, and we're going to, as soon as the weather gets nice, we're going to be back out exploring places here in northeastern Pennsylvania, the southern tier of New York and central New York, and bringing you the stories of those places during the Revolutionary War. So thank you so much. Come on over and join my Patreon, Mrs. Q History, over at Patreon, where I have some really cool stuff to share with you as a paying supporter. And you can support me for as little as $3 a month, which really helps me do things like pay for my Zoom subscription when it runs out, and I don't know it ran out. So thank you so much. Great, Ms. Silver, I'm glad you liked that. And of course, we don't learn much about England in American history class, and that's why I am here on Thursday nights to fill in all of that stuff that we didn't get to learn in school. So everyone have a great weekend. Sunday night at 9 p.m., I'll be back at republicbroadcastingnetwork.org, of course, talking about the American Revolution. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night, and I'll be back with you next Thursday.